Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Robin Minchington. I'm the Deputy Chancellor of CQUniversity. I respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the Fraser Coastlands where I am located today, the Butchulla people, as well as the traditional custodians of all of the lands on which our larger group today lives, works and learns. I pay my respects to the First Nations people and their elders past, present and emerging. Here we are at the opening of the Festival of Change, a 2-week, 34-event series that focuses attention on big issues of sustainability, sustainable regions and the role of education in civil society. It's my very great pleasure to open this festival and again to be part of celebrating CQUniversity's role as a changemaker campus. We work hard to develop the capacity of our students, our staff and our communities through social innovation and entrepreneurship, research and community engagement. This session launches our conversation around sustainability, focusing on 3 women founders here with me today. These women lead businesses which you will discover change the way we can think about sustainability and deal with the human and environmental outcomes of mass consumption. We're going to spend about 30 to 40 minutes hearing from our panel, but this will provoke many questions from you, our audience. Please submit your questions via the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, not the chat function, and we'll see how many we can get through in our allocated time at the end. Now allow me to introduce my guests today. Professor Kerry Arabena is a descendant of the Meriam people from the Torres Strait. A former social worker with a doctorate in environmental science, Kerry has held senior positions including Chair of Indigenous Health at Uni Melbourne, President of EcoHealth International, CEO of the Lowitja Institute and Director of Indigenous Health Research at Monash Uni. Kerry brings us holistic thinking, 60,000 years of genius about the integral nature of human health, environmental health and cultural health. She is currently a director of Kinaway Chamber of Commerce, managing director of the First 1000 Days Australia and Karabena Consulting. Welcome, Kerry. Sally Quinn is CEO and co-founder of Green Collect, a dynamic award-winning social enterprise. She has helped pioneer innovations in the waste industry through reuse, recycle and upcycle that gives new value to discarded items, avoiding landfill. Today you will discover how Sally values the potential of all people, especially those previously excluded from work and workplaces. She was hands-on building Green Collect from start-up to scale up where it is now. Sally is so passionate. She is also a founding director of Social Enterprise Network Victoria and mentors emerging social entrepreneurs. Welcome. Sandra Richards is the chairperson of Q+. Q+ uses 100% recycled wood milling residue and second life plastic from mainly farming operations. They manufacture novel composite wood plastic products for the agriculture, construction, mining, infrastructure and transport logistics industries. A former beef, sheep and wool producer in northwest Queensland with her husband Neil, Sally raised and educated 5 children in the bush while dealing with droughts, floods, fires and fluctuating commodity prices. She has been chairperson of AgForce and has served Australian food and fibre farming in a range of high-profile leadership roles. Sandra will help us understand Australian farmers' imperative to nurture soil, air and sea for the sustainability of their industry, their communities and the global climate. So let us begin. I would like to open with the first question today, starting with Sally. Why, Sally, are you leading a business that balances people and planet? Why are you doing this? What's your purpose?
Thanks, Robin. And hi, everyone. It's lovely to be here and to share with you. In answering that question, really, I came firstly from a people perspective and kind of grew into the planet perspective. Before I started Green Collect, I was working with women who were homeless and quickly identified that employment was a lever that wasn't being used to address homelessness. So what I observed was that it's pretty impossible to get a job if you're homeless, and it's pretty impossible to get a house if you're jobless. So this is what I set out to change. That was kind of the why, really, to help people break cycles of homelessness and poverty through employment. So my partner, Darren, and I, we had a bit of a dream, and it was if we could do anything, we would start a company that employed people who were homeless. So we would open up jobs, create jobs in the green economy and in the social enterprise space. And for us, when we thought about what those jobs should be like, we wanted to create high quality work. So work that had a purpose, work that gave a new sense of agency to people. And it was the environment and sustainability sector that we believed would really give people that sense of agency and ability to be change makers. So for me, there's always been a super strong link between caring for and respecting people and caring for and respecting the planet. So a guiding principle at Green Collect, you mentioned that in the introduction, was that for us, all resources have potential and value, and all people have potential and value. And these two things go together. One doesn't work without the other. So they're kind of the framing thoughts and purpose behind us starting Green Collect.
Great, Sally. Thanks so much. That really distills it for us, and what a platform. Now, Kerry, I would like to ask you essentially the same question. What is your purpose in leading a business that balances off people and planet?
Thank you so much, Robin. And I too would like to acknowledge all the traditional owners on the many lands on which we're meeting today and pay my very deep and sincere respects to elders past, present and emerging. And to other panellists here today, I cannot tell you how excited I am to be here and to listen and learn. And I think there's lots of really fantastic relationships that we'll all get to after this. I was really moved by my lifelong experience of being connected to country and thinking through what that actually meant from a First Nations perspective. Many people on the call might understand that Murray Island was the place where we were able to disprove the theory of terra nullius, and that there was a connection, enduring connection to country from that place. And from that little tiny island where there's about 350 living, we've been able to change international law through having a recognition of Indigenous people's rights and responsibilities to care for country. So a lot of my work has been involved from a social worker background about caring for people, very driven by the same kind of motivations as Sally has been. And I've set up other companies now to really recognise and give value to people's lived experience. And very much like Sandra, I've just finished doing some work looking at metagenomics called Connection to Country, which means that even at a microbiome and a microbiological level, we are deeply and profoundly connected. And that our wealth as a nation is very much dependent on the nutritional quality of soils, the purity of the air, the freshness of water. And we can just see how poor policy decisions have really influenced the ability for rivers to flow well and easily, which has then, I believe, really contributed to drought and those kinds of things. From an international perspective, just understanding now that we're on a new human epoch, which is referred to as the Anthropocene, in which our species alone has become the driving force of nature, and then healing the mindsets that see us as being terribly disconnected from land has been something that has been fundamental to the reasons why I started up business. The other thing, of course, is that we have an Australian government that does not really value the opportunities that are presenting with climate impacts around new kinds of jobs, new kinds of industries, new kinds of ways of thinking, being and doing. And so I left my university roles in order to establish entrepreneurial opportunities, and we've been able to progress, being able to meet the requirements then around creating financial opportunities for First Nations peoples and heal country through the kind of initiatives that we're now starting. So thank you for the question, Robin.
What a lovely throw for me to now speak with Sandra. So Sandra, open up your microphone. My question to you is slightly different. I think everyone would love to hear how your farming background over many decades in northwest Queensland and that caring for the land has influenced your thinking around your new business venture.
Oh, thank you, Robin, and it's great to be here at the start of the Festival of Change. 12 months ago, I didn't even know what a social enterprise was, and I'm so pleased I know a lot more about that and have started a business that encompasses all the worthy attributes of putting a social enterprise together. So living in Western Queensland, we had sheep and cattle properties. One of the things that is major importance is looking after your land. Most farmers and graziers always want to do the best they can for their land, and they have to, because that's their livelihood. So it's quite a far cry from where I am today, which is living in a coastal city. We put in a forestry plantation at one stage, and the timber is just about ready for harvest. So looking at the needs of the timber industry as well, it made me think about the farming and coastal farming, where irrigation is very important. I think that I don't quite agree with Kerry about government policies so much as when you live in an isolated place, you rely on yourself and also everyone around you to decide what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, and do it the best way you can. Government policies really didn't affect the way we looked after our land. We always wanted to care for it. In Western Queensland, we had a very big issue with prickly acacia. So that was, the government at one stage advised people to plant it along bore drains for shade for sheep and cattle, and it became a huge problem. So my hobby was actually eradicating prickly acacia. But getting back to where I am today, with a forestry plantation ready for harvest, there was a cooperative of small plot growers along the coast. We meet regularly and we're looking for markets for our timber. There's a huge amount of timber in the heads of the trees in the milling residue, and it seemed a terrible thing to waste that. So we were approached by someone from Victoria who developed technology, and the technology used waste hardwood and waste agricultural plastics from farms to make a range of very long-lasting, waterproof, rot-resistant products, and products that also were fire-resistant, that would be suitable for the mining industry, the agricultural industry, for the defence, for the construction industry and the rail industry. As a result of that, QPlast was born. So the idea, when we started to look at what was happening on farms locally, which is not very far away from our factory, there was a large number of farmers with the most terrible problem of getting rid of agricultural plastics. These have been essential for irrigation, trickle take, the weed mats to stop weed emergence, fluming in the sugarcane industry, and they have been given notice that they can't bury or burn their waste anymore. Plastic waste buried can be washed down into oceans and rivers and ultimately into the sea. And being right on the fringe of the Great Barrier Reef, we realised this is, well, I've been quite passionate about that for quite a long time. Finding a solution has been a really light bulb moment to be able to at least do some little thing that we can. And in this case, our factory will be using about 7,000 tonnes of waste plastic and 3,000 tonnes of hardwood waste to repurpose into 10,000 tonnes of wood plastic composite products that will be useful. It's only a start, but I do believe that it's really necessary for everybody to consider what are we going to do with plastics that really have only come into popularity or have been being used so much in my own lifetime. I'm a fairly elderly person, so I guess this is just one little thing that can help, and I do believe that our process can be reused again in other areas, and hopefully this will happen.
Wow, fantastic. That gives us a really a novel insight which many people would not even be aware about, and how it's so integrated into the whole environment. Now, both you, Sandra, and you, Kerry, have raised the challenge of government policy, and I just want to ask Sally about that from her business perspective. We've got two different views, but in fact the government policy, whether it's local or state or federal policy, is obviously in some way acting as an impetus, whether it's in a positive or a negative way. So my question, Sally, to you is, how is it for you in your business? Are you getting policy and legislation that's assisting you with your work? Or are you just, radically riding it out alone ahead of the pack?
It's a really interesting one. And I think, our history is that we kind of started off as quite grassroots activists in what we did. We saw a problem, we wanted to change it, we wanted to work outside systems. And, that was fine for a period of time. But what I've observed is really the strength around aggregating impact and looking at systems and whole systems, and how, our combined efforts can bring about greater impact. So at Green Collect, we definitely see the impact of government policy. One is a push, I suppose, in the market. So things like the social procurement framework, Victoria has one, and other states have now followed suit. So that stimulates a market that has a greater commitment and requirement to engage social enterprises in their supply chain. So that absolutely is a game changer. So government in that respect is stimulating the market. Also, we see that in the environment sector, as we see greater regulation and, landfill levies are going to more than double in the next few years. That will drive people to better action as well. So I do see the interplay of those things. And the other, I suppose, aspect of that is government as an enabler. How can policies and frameworks change to enable social enterprises to scale, to aggregate, to strengthen and get to the next level? So we've experienced government as an enabler. We think government's probably too slow. There's probably not enough urgency around our response to climate. But I think the interplay of entrepreneurs, grassroots action with combined aggregated impact that government can impact, gives us the best chance at solving these wicked problems. So a bit of both.
Great, thank you. So now I'd like to change our thinking and our emphasis. So we've just been talking about government. We ended up having a bit of a sidebar about government, which is of course a monstrous elephant in our lives, whether it's local, state or federal. Can I bring it back to the the person level, the individual level, and ask each of you as female founders, in your business, you must do heaps and heaps of mentoring, whether it's your staff or your employees. So, Kerry, can I ask you first, just very quickly, the role of mentoring in your business?
Thank you, Robin. Good question. And I think it's a really important understanding for First Nations people. We have been locked out of the buoyant market economies for such a long time. I would give a front tooth to have a factory, but we haven't been able to build up the capital basis for that yet. And that's because whilst most Australians have got the opportunity to purchase their land, a lot of First Nations people don't have that opportunity. And so we've been land rich in that we are able to live on land, but we haven't been able to own it or develop it in the ways that we've needed to. So for us, in terms of mentoring, what we're really doing is looking to create the $1 million Murrays out there. We want to have people who are engaged in entrepreneurship. And what we're doing through organisations like Ignite, for example, is setting up Indigenous businesses to, for the first time ever, be included in free trade agreements internationally. We're organising Indigenous to Indigenous trades. We are really setting the bar incredibly high and sort of talking and celebrating the successes of businesses who are achieving multiple $1 million turnovers every year, and they are very few and far between. So a bit like Sally and Sandra, we're really exploring what the opportunities are. One of the great initiatives that helped us facilitate the mentoring is come about through the Indigenous procurement policy targets, which enabled to 1% to 3% of each contracted organisation to spend on Indigenous businesses and getting them into supply chains. And so through the work of CQUiNaway, not only are we moving organisations and entrepreneurs from very start-up, where the majority of our members are earning under $200,000 a year as single operators, to really building scale and capability. A lot of that's currently happening in joint venture partnerships, and there are a range of different dynamic tensions that are part of those arrangements, in that many of them require Indigenous peoples to lose the ideas around intellectual property rights, or how to conceive of botanicals in geography and not have to go through enormous trademarking agreements. There are legal contractual arrangements that need to bind people into these kinds of things. And so we're really mentoring in that kind of way. We've also been able to develop an Indigenous women's kind of group where we come together and celebrate each other's success. And we really focus in on how we can help support each other achieve fantastic milestones. Because as women, you're not just supporting me, you're supporting my children and grandchildren and generations yet to come. And ultimately, we all need our places to be safe and secure. We need to reinvest in the divine feminine principle of fertility of our soils and of the places in which we live, and hopefully have an enriched life for generations to come. So mentoring now is incredibly important. And if anyone out there wants to be part of the $50 million club, by all means, contact me, because I'm on the way there. And that's what we've got to do, is dream big and help others, encourage others to dream big as well.
Thanks, Kerry. Once again, you've given me a brilliant handball opportunity for Sandra. You mentioned intergenerational mentoring, and I particularly wanted to ask Sandra, in your business, in your family, how do you go about mentoring across the generations?
I might start with the first aspect, mainly because Kerry has brought it up, and that's Indigenous involvement, because we are a startup company and we have moved a factory from Melbourne to Townsville. In the process, we've been commissioning all the pieces of machine plant and equipment to get it going. We have a very big site, 20 acres, and a big 4,000 square metre shed. So because we have some contacts with local people, we were able to involve an Indigenous group who have come and they've actually, there's quite a few outbuildings on our site, and they've been using sheds and dongas as their little headquarters to do several things. Wonderful, wonderful people who have brought machinery, lawnmowers, ride-ons, push mowers, all type of machinery to help with the looking after the land. They've got so many good ideas of what we've actually got a dam on our site, so that's great for fishing or whatever. So it fits in really well with our own focus on inclusion, and of course we want to include and are very happy and thrilled that this is happening. On another front, we decided, because the way of the future is lean manufacturing and using the Internet of Things and digital platforms to link all the machinery up, we actually employ an apprentice, and there'll be more in the future. He is actually doing an associate diploma in applied technology, but he's also a whiz, an IT whiz, and which is exactly what we needed. Don't ask me to really look at the ins and outs of computers. I struggle because of my age, not my age, but because I wasn't brought up at a time when computers were, that's what you did at school. I still prefer pen and paper, but I have had to do a fair bit. But anyway, Nick, our apprentice, is quite brilliant. He's got great ideas, and we embrace the fact that we've got him there, and he can help with a lot of things in the future. So I think that's where we're coming from, and I think as a social enterprise we fulfil a lot of the criteria of helping with the environment, but I feel we also help with a lot of other criteria of inclusion, which is what we want to do. We want everyone to feel as though they've got a voice in our business, and whether we're a social enterprise or not, everything we're doing is geared to that way.
Fantastic. So you've got some formalised mentoring through your apprenticeship scheme, and hopefully that'll grow as well. Now, Sally, I just want to twist that question around a little bit. Mentoring is one of the joys of life, of course, even if you're a very busy person. Do you ever find in your business that you are subject to reverse mentoring? In other words, your people working with you, are you surprised to find that they have ideas for driving the business forward?
I love that question, because it is very true of this place. We talk about inclusive employment and opportunities for transformation and growth, and often in enterprises and in things that are working towards social impact, it's the people who have formal education and who are in the positions of power are the ones to mentor others, and it seems like there's this one-way flow of growth and wisdom. But my experience is the exact opposite, and I've learned so much through the people that I work alongside, and for me that's actually one of the reasons I stay in this work, and I feel so privileged that I get to share my life with people who come from such different backgrounds, people who've slept rough for years, people who've been transient, people who have experienced hardship that I haven't. And so that the courage, the determination, the generosity has shaped a lot of how I see life and my own role. But in terms of that wisdom and knowledge into the enterprise and its growth, that's been really incredible. And you would think it's quite obvious, but what has sort of struck me is the people who value waste and resources or things the most and can see their value is often the people who haven't had abundance. And so when we have materials come in the door, the best ideas, the greatest commitment, the most resourcefulness comes from the staff who have struggled and had less access to resources. So it's those people who bring kind of the magic and the expertise into how do we handle resources and waste and extract the most from them. That comes from, you know, that almost reverse mentoring. And so I love that challenge about who holds the knowledge, who brings value, and we really do turn that on its head here in the enterprise. And even in terms of just support around barriers to employment, I often say to our staff, I have many barriers to employment, the biggest ones being my 4 kids, you know, thank you for supporting me in that. And, you know, when we've had even, you know, personal grief and issues that have been really hard for us, it's our staff who live that rawness of life, who can enter into that and connect and support in such deep ways. So it really is our lived experience staff, not that we actually talk about it like that, but who have really shaped the culture and driven us to be a deeply transformational enterprise.
Fantastic. It's, as I suspected, it becomes more than a virtuous cycle of products and services, doesn't it? It's the best part. It's that human element, which really comes to the core of social innovation. Now, to change gear a little bit and to change order of speaker a little bit, Sandra, I want to come back to you and ask you a question about your business quite specifically. As a business, what does success look like? In other words, have you got any indicators, business indicators or other kinds of indicators that tell you it's all working?
Not quite there yet, Robin, but everything looks as though it will be. We have set up our factory. We have identified all our wonderful staff. We've done a lot of R&D to show what we're going to do. I can't let out my breath yet. I'm still holding my breath, but in the next couple of weeks, well, all this will come to fruition, and we have identified markets. There's a huge number of markets. We've got all our inputs, our raw resources established, and that's been quite a big job to do as well. We've been working with the farmers, who many of them are not too far away, and we're helping with their problem where we've got a solution for that, and we have really good markets that we could fill, and in a week or two I'll let my breath out because it'll all be happening. So not quite there yet, Robin. Yes.
But that's important, isn't it? You are in early stage and it is a long, hard road, but I guess you have to build the indicators as you go along. Now, Kerry, coming to you, it could be a similar kind of response. What does success look like for you in your many faceted businesses that you're involved in?
That's such a good question. And it's very difficult when you're at the stage of business where all you're doing is chasing contracts, and then you're growing organically just by virtue of the kind of contracts that you're able to capture, then it really does have an impact on where you get to be able to lift your head above the pulpit, so to speak, and have a good look around just to see where you're at with everything. So in the first 18 months of my business, it has been chasing contracts. There's been something really important about COVID and being able to do the pivot so that you can stay ahead of market forces and slowdowns in different economies, and waiting for all the adjustments to happen and come through. And so for us, it's been a really important time to put a lot of energy and emphasis into thinking through what does the principle of abundance mean in these new kind of times? What does it mean in the Anthropocene? What are going to be these industries and starting to grow towards them? And so it has been a really challenging time, but there is absolutely part of me, and it could be just the state of my life at the moment, but I really enjoy being hungry. I really enjoy not being salaried. I like to live a little bit vicariously on the edge. And I'm deeply excited by just being in control of my own life, my own values. I don't have to doff my hat to anyone in order to do the things that I want to manifest in the world to happen. And that's been just extraordinary. So yeah, it's a really interesting kind of place to be in, and I'm enjoying it enormously. But I don't have any backstops at this point, and onwards and upwards, because that's the only way. Failure isn't an option, and I don't intend to fail. I didn't do this to fail. So yeah.
So we've got, it's an evolutionary story we're hearing now. As you start out, there are different phases, aren't there?
Yes,
And
there really are.
indicators required. Sally, coming back to you now with a more well-developed approach and system, can I just change the question a little bit in that, I mean, obviously getting contracts is an important part, and Sandra and Kerry are both heading in that direction. That's an easy output indicator. You would have been the road of lots of input indicators of success, but you're already at the output indicator. But to change the question a little bit, you've got a number of big clients now. You were telling me, you know, a couple of weeks ago. Who are your biggest clients? And what are the challenges in getting those big guys and girls on board? Unmute. Sally, good on you. We do want to hear you. Good.
Yeah, success and achievement and progress, they're all such funny concepts. And I've been doing a lot of thinking that probably is along the lines of, you know, Kerry's wisdom around decolonizing my thoughts, working, you know, away from this measure of progress and extractivism. And I feel like I'm really at a beginning stage of learning that. And how does that apply to an enterprise? Yeah, that seeks big contracts and seeks big impact. And, you know, our biggest customers are large corporates, such as Westpac and yeah, a lot of other tier one companies who have now included us in their supply chain. And I think this notion of forming partnerships, shared value, rather than looking for customers and chasing business, we're looking for people who are aligned around what do we want to achieve? What do we want for the world? How do we achieve the SDGs or lower carbon emissions? How do we do that together? What do we bring to the table? What do you bring to the table? And Westpac are a great example, because we started off receiving philanthropic funding and support through them. And after a number of years, we said, we want your business. We actually don't want the grants. If you are genuine about this, include us in your supply chain. And so that took a couple of years to get across the line. Lots of issues around becoming a supplier and risk and certifications. They were really great at supporting us in that. But genuine commitment to be partners, not just suppliers, and to see the shared value that we each bring, to, you know, celebrate that together. But I think for businesses to put their money on the line and to open up big contracts, not just small things around the edges, and to be creative, looking at how can we form consortiums with other social enterprises on contracts that maybe a smaller enterprise couldn't land on their own. So I think there's a lot of creativity in that. So yes, large contracts are really important, but only where they bring value and impact. We're not doing business for business sake. We don't want to be big for being big sake. We want to grow impact. And so for me, success is about seeing that bigger change, telling our story, sharing how we've been able to access supply chain, and equipping others to do the same. And that lends a bit to the mentoring. We're sharing our story. We're not saying we need Green Collect everywhere. We want to share what we've done so that others can maybe learn from some of our mistakes, but also some of the shifts that we've been part of opening up around the social enterprise sector.
Great, because that really draws a line for us, doesn't it, about a whole new way of defining success of social enterprises. isn't it wonderful that the three of you can, and clearly do, conceive success from your partnerships? The partnership is the key, but to negotiate the indicators is the way forward. It's quite a different way of operating, isn't it? And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. It's part of that ethos of social innovation. Now, I'm watching our Q&A numbers go up and up and up, and I think it's a good time to look at, I've been lucky enough to ask all the questions so far, but I think I might go to some of our audience and see if we can get some questions from them. Here's one coming through. Okay, so here's a good question. Are there any, I guess this is, perhaps we'll go to Kerry with this one. Are you finding, even at this early stage, that you are, as you work away in several directions for new enterprises, are there new opportunities for services that you hadn't even thought about yourself? Are you getting stimulus from the work, from the environment around you? New ideas coming in?
Yeah, it's really exciting. Again, with Kinaway and Ignite, what we've been able to do is just think about these free trade agreements, and to think about Indigenous inclusions in those is really exciting. And all of a sudden, we've got the opportunity to do some fantastic exports. So what does that actually look like? Many of our peoples are importers, and in terms of having products made overseas, brought on, put a logo on the side and then distribution. But what does it actually look like to distribute something from here overseas, and what can that do for particular industries? So there's an interesting one that's come up now for my son, who is a retired Air Forceman, and he is looking at doing well-being work with kangaroos during the cull season, for example, because of the export opportunities that come through with that, and how you can leverage then off export duties over time to take the cost opportunity out of, and the risk opportunity out of the equation. So I think that what happens is that the current success indicators that we've got are heavily reliant on risk management or risk mitigation, rather than opportunities and aspirations and being awake and aware of different kinds of industries, employment opportunities, those kinds of things. So I think this is where that theory of the diffusion of innovation really kicks into its own. And when you combine that with theoretical underpinnings of emergence, really scaling back to place is something that's pretty important for all of us. So whether it's 20 acres or whether it's 1,700 acres, those kind of things in between raise the issues of scale, and just being able to care for that through disease eradication or feral animal control, or different kinds of ways of reimagining what it's like to be a human who is deeply engaged with our ecosystem rather than our society, is something that's been extraordinarily interesting and powerful to talk about. And in terms of Sandra and the farming community, we've seen over time just the regenerative farmers really take the stand. And so it's been agriculture that's taken us into this predicament, and I truly believe it's going to be agriculture that takes us out of it. And there are so many things that it's not around business, but how we can use our business as a tool as strategically to address some of these things, like food security, like living rough, like other people's experiences where they have been compromised and not able to realise their full potential. So all of that, I think, is very much front of mind. But as you've said, Robin, one of the things that's really, really key and that we will not compromise on is values alignment. So, for example, in all of our effort, we will not take monies from extractive industry-based organisations. And I could have had so much of our work funded through those initiatives, but we refuse to take it. Well, and sometimes I've cried because they've been big financial losses, but I couldn't sell our values down the road. So I'll happily hang on to them and find like-minded individuals to work with. And that's really part of the change. We can't change because of those economic incentives. They have been set up globally to privilege one gender of one race of one species. And we are in the 6th largest mass extinction now as a result of it. So I think it's going to be women entrepreneurs that heal it, particularly First Nations women.
Okay, good on you. Thank you for that. Now, another changing gear again from our audience. Sandra, can I ask you, well, it's not me asking, it's one of our audience members. They're interested to hear when you first heard about or learned about social innovation. Is your microphone unmuted, Sandra?
Can you hear me now?
We can. Carry on. When did you first hear about this odd thing called social innovation?
I've always, and I just going back to what Kerry said, because I come from the land and regenerative farming is the answer to so many of our problems in the world. At the time, looking at putting in timber, we put the timber plantation in. Growing trees is a really lovely thing to do, especially when you've been a grazier, just looking at the vast inland open plains where we lived. But anyway, the reason I actually started the QPlus enterprise was I had timber to be harvested, and looking at harvesting the timber, that's okay, we can find markets for the timber itself, but what about the waste? What about the heads of the trees, the milling residue? And at that time too, some of our growers, timber growers in our little cooperative, were also farming, small crop farmers, sugar farmers, and there seemed to be an endless supply of waste plastics. It just made good sense when we were approached about a technology using both the waste from the trees and the waste from the farms, that at least we could get rid of some of this terrible plastic that's it's really overcoming our planet. There's so much in the oceans, in the land. A lot of the land has been, because a lot of plastics have been buried in a rain event, the water washes down, washes the plastics, and they're not all biodegradable. There's a lot of microplastics still in the soil, so we need to look at ways and means of being able to get the microplastics out of the soil as well. And we planned that because of our big site, 20 acres. We decided we'd look at a northern upcycling incubator and look at other types of waste that could be removed and help employ a lot of people, but also care for the soil and care for the land. A lot of the previous types of fertilisers have actually degraded the soil with regenerative farming practices, things like worms and new types of technologies that put natural things back into the soil, improves them. So that's another part of of what we're doing. Did I answer that question? I think I've got off track.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. It was fantastic, but I would like to move to another audience question, if I might, and I actually think this one might suit Sally quite well. Thanks, Sandra. Now, Sally, what advice would you give to young people who are passionate about sustainability but don't feel they have the power to create change? What a great question. I think you can answer that. Unmute.
Thank you. I do think about this a lot, partly when I think back to myself being a younger person, but I have 2 children who are at university and 2 still at school, and I observe, you know, the things they think about and the things that their peers think about, and there's a much greater sense of caring for the planet and wanting to actually be part of positive change in the younger generation. So I think we need to connect to young people's energy and passion. So in our enterprise, we have an internship program where we say, we need young people. We want to listen to you. You have energy and ideas that we don't have. So there's a challenge to the sector. But for young people, I think there's ranging from personal choices. I think that's always a good place to start, because that integrity of how you live, you know, what grows from that. So what do you buy? Thinking about your own personal supply chain, the power of your dollar, even though as a student or young person, it might not be great. You know, in our house, we don't buy anything new. I know our kids don't buy new clothes. They look at apps like the Good On You app about, you know, the performance of companies who are selling clothes and other things. But I do think this is a time for generations to come together. And I love what Kerry's talked and both Sandra have talked around, that is that this coming together of generations who have different resources and different ideas. And there does need to be a really deep respect for young people and their wisdom and their passion. And I think back to when we started Green Collect, I was in my late 20s, so I don't know if that considered, you know, I'm a young person, but we were prepared to take risks. I don't know if I would start Green Collect again. We worked for years with no income. So we were on Centrelink, we had little kids, it was crazy. And, you know, we didn't pay ourselves for many years, but our staff were always paid. And I think there are risks and things young people are prepared to do that us older people, you know, we're in a different stage potentially. So I think joining with organisations who are out there, the Foundation for Young Australians, there's plenty of organisations that you can participate in, but start something. You know, look at the incubators, look at social shifters. There's so many great online tools where you can become part of a community, even if it's not in person. So I would say just start being involved, contact social enterprises. I saw another question about, can people start social enterprises within bigger social enterprise companies? We are open to ideas. Pitch something, you know, like go for it, because I know the social enterprise sector is really looking at how can we include young people through things like the Social Enterprise Network Victoria. Join that, it's free. Such beautiful networking opportunities there. And that's how the 2 or 3 interns we've had came to be in this organisation. They said, could we come? And we opened the doors. So be bold, put yourself forward and believe in what you have to bring to the table.
Great answer. While I've still got you there, what I'd like us to do, our 3 women founders, is just to draw a line under our conversation today. It's really about the answers, not the questions, and the answers have been brilliant. But there's one question that's come in from our audience, and I like it, and I'd like to ask all 3 of you to answer in 1 sentence. So Sally, bear with me. The question I want to hear you answer is, what does a sustainable Australia look like? Go, Sally. Unmute and tell me. 1 sentence.
One where we respect the land, the people, where everything has a place to belong and everything comes back into use and productivity. Integrated with our personal mindsets and heart sets and our ability to create bigger change. So I think it's circularity in our thinking, you know, embracing Indigenous perspectives around that, and valuing all things.
Great.
Sentence.
Oh, you got that sentence out in one breath. Kerry, what is your answer in a sentence? What does a sustainable Australia look like?
One where we allow young people the opportunity to be excellent, and that may come from participating in different kinds of education than that which is currently available to the entire of Australian society. I think the kind of education system that we've got is deeply embedded in a century-old institution. And so I would really agitate for change in the kind of systems that we're in. Start thinking like we were a 21st century modern Australian society, not a 20th century biocidal society, and really recognise our role and contribution in Oceania. This is absolutely part of our footprint. We've got ancient trade routes that extended beyond this continent into those other places. And we have to develop up resilience for natural disasters. They are part of what it's going to be like to live in the 21st century, as is this pandemic. So we've actually got to reconcile the issues of certainty and uncertainty and find some way to cope with that.
Great, thank you. Another dimension. And finally, Sandra, at the pyramid of our wisdom, I wanted to leave you last to answer this question in a sentence. What does a sustainable Australia look like?
So, Robin, I'm getting back to looking at youth again. I have 5 wonderful children and lots of grandchildren. And I just feel that they are amazing people. And I really feel everybody should be treated with respect and given the respect they deserve, allow for their creativity, because I really feel that creativity in every aspect of life will solve the problems that the world faces. And there are so many. That's more than a sentence. I better keep quiet after that.
No, it's great, and it's totally congruent with everything we've heard. Can I throw my oar in? In a sentence, a sustainable Australia will know that there is no alternative to being sustainable. So I think that's my word on it. Not that I'm supposed to have an opinion as the moderator, but there you go. So we have come to the end of our time, and it just remains for me to close the session. It has been absolutely fantastic, everyone, audience and women founders. Thank you. I thank you so much for participating. I encourage our audience who have been invisible to us, but we know you're there. We encourage you to follow through online and find out more about the leadership of each of these amazing women. They, I think, are truly doing the heavy lifting to help us achieve the UN SDG 12, which is about ensuring sustainable consumption and production patterns. Don't forget, we can all be part of this. I feel the responsibility very acutely as one person. I am inspired by what I've heard today, and I trust that audience, you are inspired as well. If you have found today interesting, please make sure to have a look at the program for the Festival of Change and register for some other sessions over the next 2 weeks. So thanks again for joining. I'd also like to throw in a thank you to Lara Carton in Melbourne for making all of this festival and past festivals happen. What a thing. It's like an incubator in itself, isn't it? So thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and go away and just bask in what we have learned. Thanks, everyone.